I had some real bad personal shit go wrong in my life to the point where I was thinking about committing suicide. I was introducing agencies to other agencies through my network, but then I was like, well, why don't I just bring agencies from different parts of the world together, and then naturally they can just refer each other business. And when you have that group mentality, people compete against each other. So it actually, when someone gets a win, it motivates people to work more. Everyone talks about consistency, but if you're consistently shit, you're not going to blow up.
All right, Nigel, you've scaled 2 of your own agencies and a bunch of other people's agencies. So that being said, what's the number one thing agency owners get wrong?
They don't focus on team building and leadership. An agency, fundamentally, if you strip everything back, is basically just scaling people. And the sooner you accept that and the sooner you understand that and start focusing on that, the sooner you'll have a lot more success. All of these courses and stuff are great, but none of them teach leadership. And there's a reason for that. One is because a lot of those people don't learn, who do the courses, how to run big teams. And secondly, because leadership is extremely hard to teach. It's a very characteristic thing of how do you hire great people? How do you nurture great talent? And instead of, this is a tactic to do cold email and sign loads of clients, it's how do you find the best cold email in the world who you can afford? And how do you convince them to work for your agency? That's how you scale really fast. And that's what most of the agency owners I talk to get wrong, and what I got wrong for way too long, Andrew.
Yeah, I could definitely, I struggle with keeping people. So right now I'm too small. I really have to have 1099 contractors. But it's really, really hard to find quality talent. So that being said, where should people go to find quality talent? Should I put something up on LinkedIn? Should I put something up on Glassdoor? Or should I look in my local community? Where should I go?
Well, the answer is, it depends. So we can use you as a case study if you want. But my first question to you would be, do you know anyone who's running a successful marketing agency?
Dude, it's barren in Wisconsin. I don't know a soul.
Well, you've got the internet.
Yeah, I know a few on the internet. Yeah. So
okay.
Good example for me is Darren Lee. He's the podcast guy. I know him.
Yeah. And he runs an agency, does he?
Yeah. So here's kind of his offer. He does done for you podcast services. So I personally don't use his services, but from what I understand, he does, hey, do you want to use a podcast to market your business? And that's his agency style. So he does done for you, takes the podcast, does all the short form, everything like that. And then it's done for you. And he does the offers based on the amount out. So
do you, go on.
Go ahead.
Do you think that because he's a podcast host that he would have a pretty good network?
Out of money on the fact that he does, just based on the people that on his podcast.
Exactly. So do you think he would know someone who is, let's say, 5-10 steps ahead of you in the kind of agency you're running?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, so I would go to him if you want the quick route of how to get someone really fucking good, because recommendations go a long way. I would go to him and I would say, can you introduce me to 3 to 5 people who are running agencies that are 5 steps ahead of me, whatever you might be doing for the listeners, whatever they might be doing. Let's say my example would have been an e-commerce agency, someone who's running, and let's say I was doing 20K a month, someone who's doing 100K a month. Can you introduce me to 3 to 5 of those owners? Now, one, this will give you a chance to build partnerships with these people. People already have access to your ideal clients. They're offering potentially slightly different services. So it's got an added benefit. But the second thing is these kind of people know talent that can get you to 100K a month, whereas you probably don't have the experience to know what that looks like. So then when you get introduced to them, you can say, who is the best person who is a video editor, for example, in the e-commerce space? And they probably already have 3 options, or they can introduce you to someone who does. So the thing is, people don't utilize that. I've just given you an example, utilizing your network, how you could immediately get introduced to people who have access to good talent, but most people don't utilize their networks effectively. Of course, you can do LinkedIn. That is the best platform for hiring right now. You can also do freelance platforms like Upwork and whatever else. But my biggest advice, I actually just recently did this with an agency. It was doing about 8K a month because at the time of speaking, I'm mentoring agency owners. And there was an agency that was doing about 8K a month and we needed a new creative strategist. So the guy, what he usually did, and this is what most agencies do, is he speaks to 3 to 4 people and he'd hire one of them. So I said to him, instead of speaking to 3 or 4 people, let's speak to 100 people. And through that process, I knew that he would see the levels and talent. And this is exactly what we did. It was hard. We did a lot of, manual outreach to people. We used the network, my network, his network effectively. And we got 100 applicants. And from that, we found one diamond in the rough, this creative strategist. She's an absolute rock star for a decent price in line with his margins. And now his agency's at 35K a month, 3 months later, largely down to that higher. So the thing is a lot of people don't understand the volume you need to do, not just for sales, but also for recruitment. And actually, recruitment's way more important. This is what I'm trying to tell you. All the agencies are focused on acquisition and signing clients. And that's what all the courses are around, because that's the sexy shit, right? But actually, the stuff that gets you real results is the team. And you need to do more volume of applications, especially at the start, because you will not know what good talent looks like. And within that process, what you want to do with a few tips here, like tactical, get them to record a Loom video, because you can see from someone on camera, their intonations, how they speak, how they come across. You can understand pretty quickly how good they are. And then the other thing to do is once they've completed the Loom video and you filtered out those people, then get them to do a task. For example, if it's a video editor for an e-commerce agency, you give them a brief, keep it very open-ended, and just get them to write briefs for you. Actually, quite interestingly, for this position, a lot of the people, about 50 of them, I'd say, we talked about AI prior to recording. ChatGPT could already write better scripts than about 50 of those people who submit briefs. But the top kind of like 40, 50, especially like the top 10, were night and day compared to the rest. So they talk about the Pareto principle is everywhere. It certainly was within this application process. And that woke this agency owner up to the fact he was like, fuck, I now understand the level of talent that's really out there. And actually, for a decent price, I just need to do way more volume of applications. And then the other exciting part, which is what I wanted to see, is the impact that had on his client results. Now he gets more referrals from his clients. Pretty much all the clients said how much of an improvement the content was since we hired this person. And as well as that being more fulfilling, now he's just got way more case studies. And these are the real things that help agencies grow.
Yeah, I definitely think referrals is a huge thing for agencies. Because if you're not getting referrals, it kind of speaks volumes on the kind of services that you have and whether or not they're quality. Okay, so backtrack a little bit. For most of your agencies that you mentor, are they month to month, or do they do an upfront fee and then kind of a retainer?
Most of for their clients.
What was that?
For their clients, you're asking, do they do month-to-month contracts?
Yeah.
Yeah. So most of them start like that, but after working with me, they change to 90 days or 6 months. Because if you have longer contracts in place, then it's easier to forecast revenue.
Yeah. So one thing that I kind of learned, again, Darren Lee, we talked about him a little bit before, from him is doing, instead of charging an upfront fee, because people won't see results right away, is charging month to month. And so this shows the point of with the referrals as well, because it allows you to do I do 3-month meetings. So I say, hey, this is exactly what we're looking at. This is what we want to improve. This is what we're going for in terms of revenue. And I would say showing that has yielded volumes in the amount that people talk about me, and is probably going to yield. It hasn't been long enough that I get a ton of referrals from it, but you can just tell that people are oh, I see the value in this. And I'm assuming it's the same for your clients as soon as they hire someone who's really, really good, because it went from 90% to 95%. And that 5% in marketing makes a huge difference.
100%. Yeah. I mean, not just Referrals, I mean, it's kind of changing things up here, but also partnerships. I think this is one of the fastest ways agencies can grow in terms of referring you business. Because the thing is again, we talk about all these courses and stuff which most agency owners, especially the younger generation, start with. They don't teach how to build partnerships. Because if I could say to you, Andrew, what would you prefer? Would you prefer an outbound system that books you 10 calls a month with cold leads? Or it might take 6 months to a year to build, but I can basically introduce you to an agency owner that already has access to 100 of your ideal clients, that once he sees the value in that relationship, will do warm introductions to you. Obviously it's going to be the latter. And a lot of agencies, they don't understand that partnerships, you need to offer a lot of value to these people, but it's not necessarily just referring them business. It can be other things. You just need to figure out their pain points. So, if I would say to you, Andrew, what are your pain points right now? It might not be client lead generation. It might be you need to, like we said, hire some people. So maybe I could introduce you to someone who could work for your agency. That would solve your pain point. You would then see me as a valuable asset. And in return, you will probably refer me some business, or you at least think about that when the next opportunity arises. So this is another thing that agencies get wrong. Partnerships. And if you, by the way, I've spoke to a lot of agencies that do, 10, 20 million a year, and a lot in the e-com space that were built off the back of Shopify partnerships, not just of agencies, but also all the tech companies in the Shopify ecosystem. As Shopify exploded and e-commerce exploded in the last decade, a lot of these agencies, they didn't really grow from outbound. They just grew from partnerships with these big tech companies that grew so fast off the back of that growth.
How would you go about finding these partnerships?
Again, it all depends on who you already know, but the best thing to do is recommendations. So if I was to say to you, with this podcast guy, you could go to him and then say, so who is the best agency that is operating in this space and helps these kind of clients? What you basically can do from that, and then you get on a call with that agency and you ask, who's the best agency for this service? Because again, the best recommendations and the fastest way to kind of get the truth, because that's what we're all trying to figure out here, is go off the recommendations of people who have experience and have been there and done it. If you haven't got anyone whatsoever, probably just look at content online, whether it's LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever it might be, YouTube, and just see people who are actively putting out content in your industry and try and reach out to them and get on a call, figure out what their pain point is, and then offer value. And then from that one relationship, again, ask for an introduction to another service and go from there.
Okay. Yeah, I know I have, I think biggest one for me is I have a partnership with a social media marketing agency. The problem is we're both too small. So we're both running like $5 to $6 grand a month. But the problem is there's just purely not enough leads to pass back and forth.
Yeah,
so
I understand.
The problem is finding someone that's big enough and in your niche, which is such a small subset of people. You have to I'm assuming it's going to be a bit of a grind to find people, if you will.
I think you'd be very surprised.
Really?
Because I started off working with agencies one-to-one, then obviously I kind of ran out of time. So I did a group of 10 agencies last time, and I'm doing it again September 2024, another 10. Through those 10 agencies, the amount of business that was referred with people who said when they came in the exact same thing took me by surprise, if anything. Like agencies from different industries, they just knew people in their network who could refer them business. So it's not necessarily that. All you've got to ask is, who are my ideal clients? You've got to get clear on that. And then you've just got to ask, who already knows them? It's not. So let's just take an e-commerce brand, for example. Let's say it's the e-commerce owner of an 8-figure brand. Okay, he's working with agencies. So ideally you want to get partnerships with the agencies are already working with in different industries. But they're not the only friendships he has. He also knows people in the manufacturing space. He also knows people who are investors. He also is just friends with other entrepreneurs. There's loads of people within what I call his sphere or his or her sphere of influence, which already have access to that person because they've built a friendship up over time. And you just need to find who those people are. So yeah, it's going to be fucking a bit of work. But again, most people aren't willing to do this. So if you do it, it will give you a massive competitive advantage. And trust me when I tell you, these business owners much prefer recommendations from friends than getting slammed in their inbox.
Yeah. I definitely noticed that a lot of like, if you do something with someone who's a friend of a friend, they're way more likely to buy from you.
Of course.
I also wanted to I also learned that with the podcast, I've been reaching out to people primarily on LinkedIn, which I know is how I messaged you. Yeah. Of people are way more receptive than I ever thought. Yeah. Way more, especially if you're like, hey man, like, would you be open to it? And there's no pressure, nothing. People are way more receptive. I'm constantly shocked by that.
Yeah. And where do you get an hour or two of someone's time who's pretty busy? I'm pretty busy myself. Where else would you get an hour or two of that person's time? You probably wouldn't, right? If you cold emailed me asking for a 2-hour conversation, I probably wouldn't have responded, or I would have said no. So now, obviously, after speaking to me, build some trust. And if you needed me to introduce you to someone, I'm probably open to doing that. So yeah, that's a very smart way. I also did this at my last agency. We interviewed about 40 to 50 brands that were doing 8 and 9 figures. And I used the same approach. And yeah, people want to talk about their stories. So it's a great idea.
I think it's bonkers, because I can't even if, bar nothing else, I get no referrals, nothing out of the podcast, just me doing it, I've learned so much, because the reality is I'm super young. And so learning from the podcast is hands down one of the best things ever. You mentioned your podcast. I wanted to talk about that a little bit as well. Why'd you stop?
Because I left that agency.
Okay.
Yeah. So I had some. So basically, that agency, I'm not the main founder of that agency. I joined when they're doing about 5K a month. I became the CEO, scaled it to 140K a month. Obviously, I have a bit of equity in that, but I mainly built my brand and reputation off the back of it. And I had some pretty well documented. I've got a newsletter called David to Goliath where I documented it all. But I had some real bad personal shit go wrong in my life, to the point where I was thinking about committing suicide. And that was when I was out in Austin last year. And I needed to leave that agency. So I stepped down and I came back to the UK to rebuild my life. And I used David to Goliath as a vehicle to basically get me up off the ground, because I see a lot of people in this world who are, complaining and shouting out into the void. And that victim mentality, it doesn't actually get you anywhere. And I know, Andrew, because I tried it and it didn't fucking work. So I want to be more of a bastion and to hold the identity of someone who was in the shit, but said it to themselves with self-belief and self-responsibility. I'm going to build myself up back off the ground step by step and document that process. So for other people out there who are struggling, who can relate, can also be inspired to go, yeah, I need to take, control of my life, and I need to put it on myself to get myself off the ground. But that's why I stopped doing that podcast. And I've since started another podcast called David to Goliath, but it's mainly part of the newsletter. The newsletter is the main thing. But yeah, to answer your question, just wanted to give it a context there. I stopped it because I left that agency, so it no longer served a purpose.
Let's touch on that. So you have the newsletter, you have the podcast with David to Goliath.
Yeah.
Walk me through the story there. Take me from your lowest low to essentially where you are now.
Well, I already gave you the highlights. I don't know if you've got specific questions at different part of the journey, but yeah, it all started at the end of Q4 last year, when essentially, long story short, keeping it respectful, the person that believed in me most essentially betrayed me. And it sent me, I was kind of the guy at school who got bullied, was an outsider. I don't really fit into crowds. That's probably why I'm an entrepreneur, Andrew. And I had one person who just fundamentally believed in me, and that's all I needed. And then that person betrayed me. So that sent me into a very dark place. And for the first time in my life, Andrew, I needed to believe in myself. That's why it's called David to Goliath, because David, as the old story goes, the underdog story, had a slingshot and a few pebbles, but still managed to beat the mighty Goliath. And it's David to Goliath, because the whole point is instead of David versus Goliath, it's about going on a journey and rewriting your own story, your comeback story. And I've always loved comebacks, and I wanted to make one my own. And I really resonated with the underdog mentality. So whether it's sports or business, on the David to Goliath newsletter, we talk about these different stories. And that's what I love. I love people who go through the American dream, go from nothing to take responsibility and build something great. And that's what I'm doing. And I'm doing it step by step. I'm in a year of transition. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do long term. I want to really push myself, build a big business. Got a few ideas, but I'm helping these agencies because when I left Alpha Inbound and I came back to the UK, obviously I've got like a audience at the time of speaking, about 55,000 people on LinkedIn, which I used. We can talk about that personal branding to grow the last agency. A lot of agency owners followed me. So they asked me, okay, you've left Alpha Inbound now. Can you come and help me? So I did it with a few people. And, over the course of this year, I've worked with 16 agencies, been pleasantly surprised by the results. Out of half of those people, out of those 16 people, half doubled their agency, 2 tripled, and 1 5x'd in revenue over the course of 3 months. So yeah, it's been a good journey, and I'm going to do that for the rest of this year. But then after that, who knows? Obviously, I still have the newsletter and the LinkedIn stuff. Personal brand's very important. But I'm still figuring things out, and I'm kind of accepted now that I'm using this as a year of transition to figure shit out about myself, Andrew, but still providing value to the marketplace and obviously getting paid for doing that.
That's the nature of especially like early to medium business, from what I understand, of like, it's just a shit show until you figure it out. Like, it's just kind of throw ideas at a wall and pray one sticks, or like throw an idea, maybe it sticks a little bit, tweak it a little, make it stick a little bit more, and just keep rinse and repeating. Like you mentioned from going to one-to-one coaching to doing 10.
Yeah.
Just purely because of volume. So how is that transition working in this respect?
Just more work, because I still do one-to-one. So I still, with all 10 people, even though the reason I did group is because, obviously my time, but it was actually more for the partnerships. Because what I was doing when I was just doing one-to-one is I was introducing agencies to other agencies through my network. But then I was like, well, why don't I just bring agencies from different parts of the world together, and then naturally they can just refer each other business. And when you have that group mentality, people compete against each other. So it actually, when someone gets a win, it motivates people to work more. So that's one of the real reasons I did the group. But I still do all the one-to-one stuff anyway. So I still have at least 1 hour call with each of the agency owners every single week. So the difference is it's just a lot more work for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. What's the offer there is essentially to scale the agency, because you know it, right?
Agencies that are doing between, because obviously I've got some more insight the numbers now, between 5 and 25K a month. Usually what I'd say to them, but there's not a guarantee, because I can't guarantee they'll implement the knowledge I give them, even though I'll hold them accountable, is they usually say they can get to 50K a month in half the time, because that's what I've noticed. Actually, some of them did it faster. Like one agency went from 12 to 65K a month. They're now at 90K a month, like 4 months later. But those results aren't typical. Those 2 guys, one was 21, one was 19, and they just like hustling like I've never seen before. So, it's a lot. What I've noticed is I've given everyone the knowledge and I've held everyone accountable the same, but the results were wildly different. And I noticed it's actually all about the mindset and the character of the individual. So that's why for this next round, I've been more selective with who I'm going to work with. But it was interesting to see that actually to get to 100K a month, it's all about the mindset, really.
Yeah, fuck me, dude. I feel so behind. I'm running like 6K right now, and they're 19 and 21. I'm 19 as well, but like I just feel so behind.
Yeah, I'll introduce you to those guys if you want to speak to them. They're class.
That would be fun. That's insane. Congrats to them. Wow.
Yeah, they're absolutely killing it. And so I'll tell you actually what I did to help them. So they were doing about, like I said, 12K a month. And they said to me, hey, Nigel, yeah, we need help. We need to get more sales. We need to get more leads. So I looked at everything and I was like, actually, guys, you don't need to get more leads. You've got a problem with pricing. And out of all the agencies I've helped, Andrew, apart from obviously the mindset side of it, where I work with them one-to-one and break these mindset beliefs, which I'll go into more in a second, the biggest leverage thing that's helped all the agents I've worked with and helped me go from charging 1K a month at Alpha Inbound to minimum 10K a month. Sometimes we were charging 25K a month is pricing. Because within a business, and especially an agency, the only two ways you can get more cash and profit is you can either decrease your costs, which you can't really do that much, especially if you're starting out, or you can increase your pricing. So with these guys, I helped them increase their pricing, but we found people who could afford that pricing. And I built them a sales process that I'd already battle tested myself to sell like $2 million worth of revenue. And I practiced it with them relentlessly. So when they showed up on the calls, they got respect of these older business owners and they could be charging, and some of their deals are worth now like 10K a month. And that was the biggest unlock for them, is working with someone to help them, have a pricing structure which they could offer a lot more, but position themselves as a professional service that very experienced business owners would trust. So increasing pricing is something you should think about, as well as other agencies that are below 25K a month, because it's the fastest way you can grow. And then what you do with that money is not buy Lamborghinis with it. You hire better talent. And that's where it goes back to people.
Yeah. That's really one thing that I want to spend more time on, especially once I get a little bit bigger, is spending the time to find someone who's a really, really, really good copywriter.
Yeah. Well, I would say, why would you wait? Why wouldn't you already be doing that?
I think right now, like for me, it's because I'm working on my copywriting skills. And my problem, like I'm changing a bunch of things. Like I literally just increased my prices.
Yep.
And so I think it's probably smart for me to wait until I kind of see how those prices shake out. That'll probably be a month or so, and then hire.
Okay. Well, I've got an idea for you.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't mind me sharing.
Go ahead.
Find the best copywriter on LinkedIn and get them on your podcast, because then they will know great copywriters that they can introduce you to. So proactively, you're already building a network of copywriters in advance.
2 days. He's coming on in 2 days.
Who is it?
It's whoever Darren Lee thought was the best. I forget what's his name. Because he was introducing me. Tim Stodds.
Oh yeah, Tim. Yeah, I know him from LinkedIn. I mean, I don't know him, but it's more like an acquaintance. But we've gone back and forth before. But yeah, he definitely knows his stuff. So yeah, I would ask for intros from him. Like, say to him at the end of the podcast, if he's listened to this prior, like you see, he's getting a heads up. But say, hey, look, I'm going to hire a copywriter in a few months, Tim. If you got anyone in mind, I'd love an introduction when the time's right. So plant the seed. And this is the thing I'd say to people, which is, okay, sure, you get people on podcasts. And this is kind of like the whole thing I'm trying to give to people with David to Goliath. You get people on a podcast, but you've got to be bold and you ask them for what you want, because sure, even if they're in your network, they're not just going to go, they're busy. They're not going to go, oh, Andrew, I know some great copywriters. Do you want me to introduce them? You have to. A lot of agency owners struggle with this because they don't believe in themselves. You have to be the person who goes, hey, look, I'm looking to hire a copywriter. And just like you've seen by DMing me or DMing all the people you're DMing on LinkedIn, you'd be very surprised, because if you ask, people like me, people like all these other great people, I'm sure they're more experienced than me, They like people. People want to help people. This is one of the biggest pieces of advice I can give to anyone listening to this. People want to help people who are already helping themselves. So, like these guys, the 19 and 21-year-olds who scale their agency to 90K, we don't, work with each other anymore per se, but I just want to see those guys succeed because they're just going after life with so much goddamn tenacity. I just want to support them. I want to introduce them to people. I want to, give them feedback on things. And that'll be the same for you. And I think this is, some advice for the people. It's like, be bold and ask people for what you want, because you'll be very surprised that a lot of the time they will respect you for that and they will help you.
One of the things that's at least helped me with that is like cold calling. Like I want to prescribe every single person that I work with to cold call at least 50 times, because you get so adapted to the no. It's like, fuck, I'll just ask, like, might as well.
Yeah.
And you're like, so what if I get told no? It happened. Like, I probably 65 to 70% of the people I reach out to on LinkedIn, no response, nothing. But that 30%, every time, very receptive, super nice, every time.
Yep.
Like it's
networking. So prior to building Alpha Inbound, I built a real estate agency, and as part of that, so we got like leads for home buyers from Facebook ads, whatever. And part of that process, what we realized is the realtors, they weren't calling the leads we put in their CRM. So what we basically did is I trained a team of 10 people in the Philippines to call all of these leads as soon as they sign up for a form on Facebook. So training 10 people, literally like people who have worked at call centers in the Philippines with American accents, to literally speaking to Americans and qualifying them to then warm transfer to realtors. Just through doing that process, I can't tell you how much that helped me with my voice, when I present myself in a podcast. So I work very hard to work on my tonality, to work on the storytelling, to cut out all the ums and likes. And this is another piece of advice I'd give to anyone listening, Andrew, is the voice is the way that you communicate with everyone, whether it's your family, whether it's a person you're in a relationship with, whether it's your team members, whether it's your partners. And when you're doing these podcasts or when you go to meet someone in person, you get one chance. People make impressions in, I think it's a 1/9 of a second. And by the way, in terms of the psychology and statistics and science, if you make a bad impression, it takes 9 subsequent positive impressions to redo that first bad impression. So when is the last time that you practiced learning your voice? Because for most people, it's when they were a child. That's it. Yeah, it's the one thing that we all can change, and it's the one thing we use to communicate all of our ideas. So even just for the voice side of it through cold calling, but I would also say, and this is something I did, is hire a voice coach, because you will not believe how much opportunity there is to grow if you learn to speak articulately and, convince people with your ideas and storytelling. Everyone's got a great story. They just need to learn how to tell it. And I think hiring a voice coach is a massive unlock that most people are underestimating.
I like that. That's part of the reason I started the podcast, because I noticed a lot of verbal tics that I had, for lack of a better word. And it's nice to remove them. Like, it's crazy to me, like rewatching podcast 1 to now. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I'm still not that great. But coming from the first podcast to now, it's completely different. And it's only been 4 months. It's insane. Like I don't know what to tell you. Just learning to speak.
You're practicing. You're putting in the reps, but as well as just putting in the reps and practicing, if you do a consultation again, I'm happy to introduce you to some people, but if you do a consultation with someone who prepares people for like TED Talks, you will also notice there's a lot of strategy inside of it, and there's a lot of things and a lot of ways you can get better. And I'm still working on this myself every single day. The other one in terms of tactical I'll give is silence. Most people are so afraid to be silent that if you're in a negotiation, whether it's, let's say, in a sales call, or whether you're negotiating a contract with a team member, if you could be silent, then you always get the upper hand, because most people can't. So they will stop. And because of the silence, they will fill in that awkward silence. And that's mentally when you know that you've got the upper hand. So if you're confident, when you need to think, instead of going, which most people do, and listen to most people, because literally everyone does it, just stop in your silence and think, and be okay with that. Because people trust me. Firstly, you'll stand out like a sore thumb. Secondly, you'll get respect. If you look at Hormozy, just did a new podcast with Chris Williamson. Look at that podcast. Yeah. Look, did you see how he was silent when he was thinking?
I did.
And did you see how powerful that is?
It's also so weird on audio because you get this like pause, and it's just, it creates,
it draws
almost
you in.
nerves. Yeah. And
it does.
You can zone out for 5 seconds. Mm-hmm. Silence. Speak so loud, and you're zoned right back in instantly.
And it also lets people marinate on your thoughts. Because if you say something that's potentially quite technical, or it takes a while for someone to relate to it, you say it, and then you stop, and then someone digests it, and then you move on to the next point. The other big one is storytelling. I can't tell you, humans, 50,000 years worth of evidence we've got, that without getting into religion, because I'm not here to tell people, what their religious beliefs should be. It's not my line of conversation, but the Bible is sold 7 billion copies. And what the Bible is basically a collation of stories. And this is why it works so well, because it's easy to communicate these stories. I don't remember much at school, whether it's geography, history, probably my own undoing. Maybe my memory fails me, Andrew. But I'll tell you what I did learn, because I went to a Christian school. I remember when Moses parted the Red Sea. I remember when Jesus fed the 5,000. I remember these stories. They are lodged in your brain. So if you can get good at storytelling, it's a huge unlock. And it gives you, everyone talks about leverage, but if you get the opportunity to speak on stage or speak at a podcast, and instead of now one-to-one, you can talk to 10,000 people, think about the leverage that has because of your storytelling, the impact, the lasting impact that will have on every single person. And if the storytelling's so good that those people feel compelled to then spread that message on to 10 of their friends, you've now just basically got 100,000 people interested in you. So think about that from a point of leverage.
It's insane the amount of people that you can message online with that leverage point. Like, when I say this, I mean YouTube. You can see 60 views and you're like, that's nothing. But that's 60 people that saw your podcast, your YouTube video, your short. Now, is it going to have as big of an impact on them as something in person? No. But 60 people every single day, if you're posting every single day, that's not a trivial amount. That's a ton of people. And the other thing that I want to note on this is if you're doing those reels and it tells a story, you take someone from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 and walk them through, they're going to buy into you. They're going to like you. We mentioned Chris Williamson earlier. he does a really good job of bringing up nightclubs and his party boy days, because it shows a transition from A to B to C to where he is now. And you get super invested in that. And I have money on the fact that that is what makes him stand out compared to all of the other podcasters, because most of them don't go back to their past. They just want to talk about the now.
Yeah. And also something else for Chris Williamson to kind of round off the point earlier. Sorry about that. Chris Williamson was one of the only podcasters who hired a voice coach when he started taking things seriously. And he said it had a huge impact. So,
True.
You know, what does that tell you?
Yeah. It's insane, the little details, how much they add up. Because one small thing done 100 times is 100 small issues. And 100 small issues is not nothing. But the reverse is true.
Exactly.
100 smaller good things is 100 small good things that add up, and it's not small.
Well, yeah, the thing is people don't realize, everyone talks about compounding with money, but it doesn't just apply to money, it applies to everything. But what people don't understand is it also compounds in both directions. And it's compounding now every single day. So if you're eating shit food, then it's compounding against you every single day. You don't have a choice in this matter. It's a force of nature. It's either compounding for you or against you in every single thing, whether it's your knowledge, whether it's your skill sets, whether it's the people you hang around with, everything. There's this invisible force of compounding that's working either for you and against you. And the people that understand that they can control it and change it and shape it, like, for example, Chris Williamson, who for 4 years made zero money from his podcast and now is one of the top 50 podcasts in the world, the last 2 years of growth, they're the ones that are winning in life. But most people aren't even aware of it. So if you're aware of it, it's a good start. But then you need to look at all of your daily activities to see, okay, if I do this thing every single day, in 10 years, do I get the massive compound effect? But not just with money, with everything.
I think it was the Hormozy podcast where he talked about how his 1 million subscriber gift from one of his friends was a graph of his subscribers. And he said it was just a flat line up until about a month or two before. And then it just shot up. Like, I think about that every day where I'm like, did I do enough? I'm not reaping, like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep doing this. Yeah. But I remind myself of that every single time because I'm like, it's going to be basically zero until it isn't.
Yeah. I do have a difference of opinion on that, though, because everyone talks about consistency. But if you're consistently shit, you're not going to blow up. Like, I think people take this and then they think, okay, so if I just do a podcast episode for 10 years, I'll be like Joe Rogan. No, that's not how this works. Joe Rogan, well, first of all, he got on the train early, but secondly, he used to be on TV. He's a UFC. He's got a big network. He's an incredible conversationalist. He's got all these other skill sets. So the point is that as well as being consistent, which is definitely important, you also need to improve. You need to look at feedback. You need to hire, if it's podcasting, you need to hire a voice coach. You need to network with other podcasters. You need to get critical feedback, and every single episode should be better than the last. And you have to put pressure on yourself to make those adjustments. And it doesn't have to be, a movie style production on episode 1 to 2, but even if, for example, you remove an every time you speak from episode 1 to 2, that is a difference. And then obviously it goes on and on, because the thing is every time you speak, and let's say, I don't know how many people listen to this podcast, but let's say it's 1,000, 100, whatever it is. And again, this is where people get impressions wrong, because impressions are just analytics that we can see, but it doesn't tell the whole story. Because if you have, like I spoke about before, 100 fans that resonate so deeply because your storytelling's so good, because you're making an impact on your life through the value you're sharing, And those 10 people, there's probably someone who might listen to this today, whenever it goes out, Andrew, and say, hey, did you hear that podcast of Andrew the other day? Yeah, he's building this agency and he's talking about how he's going to do this for years. And he's reaching out to copywriters and he's building his network. And I think you should check him out. Oh, Andrew who? And then he does this the next time he speaks to someone. And then all of a sudden, this is where the big compound lifts happen. Because if all of those 100 people tell 10 of their friends, then it's 1,000. But usually it takes time for people to go and tell those people because they need the time. If you look at Robert Cialdini's influence, 6 principles of influence, one of them is a consistency bias. So people need time to see again and again and again, and then they will start thinking about you when they enter those conversations. And all of a sudden, it could be 1,000 people that all tell 10 of their friends. And then suddenly, episode 168, you get 10,000 listeners. You're like, how the hell did that happen? That's how it happens, what I just said. So the quality, I think that's where people struggle with at the start. They just put out shit because they're like, well, no one's listening to it. But if you put out really good quality with what you've got, and this can just be great conversations and storytelling for obviously your desired audience and specific and relevant to them, then they will remember that, and slowly but surely they will become your salespeople almost. And then they will spread the word for you almost. And it's a bit of a weird thing to say, but almost like a religion. Because that, if you look at someone like Hormozy, again, the way he brands himself, he's like, this is the Mosey tribe. Like, what do you think he's doing there? He's bringing people in because people want to feel like they can belong to something. And they're like, I'm part of the Mosey tribe. I want to associate myself with that. And he says that, and it's almost cult-like mentality. And anyone can do this. It just takes a lot of time. But don't just put out podcasts or whatever it is, social media posts, and not think that you have to improve, because those people, you only get one chance. You only get one chance to make an impression. Make it fucking ridiculously good. Make it the best podcast episode they listen to all year, and they will spread the word for you.
It's also really interesting, like, to add on to that point, how most things, even if you do it right on that episode, it doesn't happen overnight. Like, especially if you put something on social media, whatever, it'll probably take a month before it starts to like really kick off. Specifically YouTube. Reason why I point out YouTube is when I was younger, like 14, 15, I ran a CSGO YouTube channel because on CSGO you could trade skins, and the skins were essentially like early cryptocurrency effectively. Mm-hmm. And I got really good at that. Well, I was doing tutorials on it, and some of my tutorials would typically get 100, 200 views. But the times that I put out really quality content, like some of them are up to 75K now. I was a 14-year-old. Yeah. Like, it takes time. And those aren't shown overnight. It's still growing. I think that's what a lot of people don't understand is, like, when you put something out, a lot of the views don't come right away. They come like a month down the line.
Yeah. That's where podcasting and YouTube has a big advantage, because it's way harder to go viral on those platforms. But compare, for example, LinkedIn posts, Twitter, those posts, life value is probably max 2 weeks. Okay, sometimes like people refer to an old post, but with YouTube and podcasting, like you said, they only get bigger in time. And I remember when Sam Ovens, you know Sam Ovens is, right? So when Sam Ovens, he turned off all of his ads and he went more to organic with consulting.com. And what they started to see, which he didn't realize, is that his old YouTube videos from 5 years ago were bringing in sales. And that's when he realized he should double down on YouTube organic, because it compounds over time. And this is something that, like being transparent, I've not done. I focused on LinkedIn. And if I was going to do it again, I probably would go for YouTube. I think YouTube and podcasting are the two ones which they compound over time, but they are also harder to get into because obviously, like production, you'll know, you make YouTube videos. It's harder to put out a YouTube video than write a a 500 character LinkedIn post. So, harder to get into, more time, but back end compounds hard.
It is. Like YouTube, for example, I pay for an editor. And the reason being is I know it's like, for me, it's a lot of money right now, but I know it's going to compound down the line because the quality is so much more important on YouTube. LinkedIn, for example, do you know what Opus Clips is?
Yeah, I know of it.
Yeah. So Opus, I typically take snippets from the podcast and I use that to A/B test what clips are going to do well from any given podcast and then send it to an editor. So what that does is LinkedIn, 9 times out of 10, the Opus clip will do the exact same as the edited clip. But on YouTube, it's almost 4 times the amount when you get the edited clip in terms of views, likes. So that having something curated, having something that's good and quality on YouTube, and the other one is Instagram. Really, really important. You have quality on those 2 platforms.
Yeah. And then when you obviously it's scaling faster, then you can pay for people to distribute it, right? So having, like Iman Gadzi does, he pays like 50 editors to all just distribute short form clips everywhere. And that's just a distribution thing of where you can scale. But I would also say what's smart from your side is the fact you're paying someone to do the editing means inherently in terms of when you invest in something. If you talk about, again, back to Robert Cialdini, which, by the way, if you're a marketer, you're building a marketing agency or you want to make more sales and you haven't read the book Influence by Robert Cialdini, buy yourself a copy and read it right now. It's the biggest unlock, bar none, if you want to influence people. But one of the other principles he talks about is a commitment bias. So obviously, if you pay for staff members and you invest in things or you invest in a mentorship with someone, you are now more likely to put more effort into it because you're putting your hand up and saying, I am going to do this. I'm investing my money into it. And if you really want to know, by the way, what people care about in life, look at where they spend their money because they'll tell you one thing, but then they'll, spend money drinking out of their friends. That's actually really what they care about. But if you're investing in this podcast with hard-earned money, you're not making that much now, that tells me you're serious. And that is a good indicator long term.
I was thinking about this while I was making my new lead magnet. So one of the big drivers for my agency is search engine optimization. Yeah. And so I was trying to make like an SEO, like really simple crash course, super high overview of like, listen, this is how you can get your website to rank for your name. Like, but super simple. And I was thinking about this and I'm like, if I give it to people for free, no one's going to go through it because it's 20 minutes, 30 minutes, because like it's hard to really get the basics of SEO like super fast. Give it to them in 5 minutes. It's super hard. So I was thinking, what if I charge them $5, $25 to have access to it? Because then they go, well, I put my credit card in. Oh, maybe I should take a look at it. Maybe I should actually do it. It's like, it's a weird, like psychological thing that until I was working on something that I never thought about.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I'll give you another example. So this mentorship that I do, it's not that cheap. It's like for the 4 months that we work together, again, time recording, who knows, it might change, but it's $8,000 US. Now, for an agency that's doing 10K a month, that's a pretty big investment, right? But what's interesting, so of course, I did do that because obviously I want to profit from this. I have costs involved to cover as well. And I aligned it with the value. Most people got massive ROIs out of it. So it was fairly priced. But I also did it because it was the thing to me of who's serious. And also mainly the action threshold. So when some of the guys had put down like 8K, their action threshold after they'd done it was night and day, man. Like I'm not even joking. It was like they were working 5 times harder. And this goes back to something that when I've been in really hard moments in my life and what I've understood by talking to successful people who have come from the ground up is constraint is the biggest driver of innovation. So if you want to grow really, really fast, put constraint on yourself. And again, that's why a lot of people who are in very painful situations, they take big risks and they have nothing to lose, because we are creatures of survival, but you can manipulate that. You can manipulate your survival instincts by investing in something that you wouldn't usually invest in. Obviously, you don't want to be stupid and like whack it all on a credit card, but so you've got to have some sort of logical thought process. But if you spend $8,000 on something, or you make an investment in a team member, that's another big one. When I was at Alpha Inbound, I remember we were hiring contractors who would be maximum 30, 40K a month. We hired an operations manager that was 100K or 120K a year. And that was like, wow, we've really got to make this work. And we did. And we scaled the agency to 140K a month. So the constraint really does drive innovation. If you don't have constraint in your life, actively look to put yourself in constraint, because so many people are comfortable and they're working jobs and they don't have any constraint in their life. And I'll give you one more example. So the UK, by far in the last few centuries, the biggest period of innovation was straight after World War II, by far. And why was that? Because we had the most constraint on our country. And the innovation that came out of that period for all sorts of manufacturing and, technology was incredible. And we've never seen growth like that since. And the biggest reason now why the UK doesn't have that much innovation, in my opinion, is it's because we're not constrained. We're comfortable as a nation and we don't have that constraint. And that's why I actually prefer the US mentality more, because you still have the American dream, a country of immigrants that came together to build something from nothing. And that's why I love entrepreneurship. But that's my advice to people. Put constraint on yourself. And if you don't have any, make it happen.
Complacency is a huge issue. I see,
yeah.
Like I'm in college right now as well, but I see that so much with just people in college, because they'll show up and they just get the work done and they're like, I'm fine. And it's like, if you show up, put in the effort, the return will be 1,000 times better. 1,000 times.
Yeah, but they've not got constraint on them, have they? Mm-hmm. Like, what? They haven't got any pressure on them to deliver great results. That's why in business you see these wild innovations, because if you're in a really tough situation, you'd be massively surprised just by your biological instincts of how you come up with these weird, wacky solutions to get yourself. That you've got to be very resource efficient. You probably haven't got much money. So you've got to think of innovative ways to get yourself out of a hard place. And you'd be surprised in those situations of the innovation that you can drive. Like I've done this so many times, man. It's ridiculous. But people in college, people in university, people who work normal 9-to-5 jobs, they have no constraint or like real pressure. It's different when obviously you've got pressure. I'm not saying there's no pressure. There's some great jobs that, like, let's say people in the fire service, like the people who save lives, and doctors, like we couldn't live without these people. They're incredible heroes of society. But for the large part, people who work in office and desk jobs, it's one thing having to deliver a project on time. It's another thing literally being responsible for people in your business. Let's take your editor for example, who's probably using that money to support their family. These kind of people, like, you have that responsibility, that this is real pressure. And through that real pressure, you will figure out innovative solutions. And if you look at all these stories, if you look at Alex Hormozy, Chris Williamson, all of these people, they all had a period of massive constraint and pressure. And then from that came the big innovation that unlocked all of the growth. It's the same thing every time. But the thing is most people aren't willing to put themselves in that constraint because it's fucking uncomfortable. Like, it's uncomfortable. It's horrible, because in the moment of constraint, there's no certainty that you get through it. But that's the price. That's the price of working in the dark when no one else is looking, when you're recording these podcasts, when you're outside of college and it's midnight and you've hardly got any downloads and you're like, why the fuck? And you'll go through this period. I'm sure you've been through it yourself, Andrew, when you say, why the fuck am I doing this? That question happens to all of us. Trust me. Still happens to me every single day. And it's when you push through that, you get conviction and belief in yourself. And my favorite quote, bar none, which I've got on my wall up there, is from Winston Churchill, which is one man with conviction will overwhelm 100 who have only opinions. If you have conviction, the kind of conviction that you saw on the podcast of Alex Hormozy, that kind of conviction only gets built through constraint. When you have the uncertainty and still push through, it's the kind of conviction that when you walk in a room, everyone turns their heads and they say to you, you've got a presence. That's how it gets built. Everyone talks about confidence and, how do you get a presence? That's how you do it. You have massive constraint, uncertainty with no guarantee it's going to work out, and you figure out innovative solutions and you get to the other side, and then you stack up undeniable proof that you are the person that can take bigger and bigger risks in line with the resources that you have. And the hard point of the fact, and the reason that I started David to Goliath, because I needed that to get out of my hard situation, and all the conversations I had, especially with young guys, is that they're just not willing to take that leap of faith. And really what gets you through it, tying everything back together, is self-belief. It's believing in yourself to the fact, talking about Winston Churchill, if you don't mind me just sharing, because this is an incredible story. Winston Churchill actually had a speech impediment, so he couldn't speak properly. In his friendship groups, he was called a freak, okay? Now, he kept on believing in himself. He kept on working on his speech. And at 65 years old, when the country was in its darkest hour, building businesses, that's one category. Saving an entire nation in its darkest hour against the might of evil of the Nazi regime. And how did he do it? He did it through the power of his voice. The same thing that he was called a freak for his whole entire life. At the age of 65, he used that voice, because he kept on believing in himself, to inspire an entire nation to believe that victory was possible. That is what I call conviction. And that's why I fucking love that quote, man.
Churchill's a fucking beast.
Yeah.
Of all the people, I'm in the US and we know all the US presidents and everything, but we also know Churchill.
Everyone knows Churchill.
If you don't know Churchill, you're living under a rock. He's built different.
And the other one that I'd say can probably be in the category of Churchill, in my opinion at least, is Muhammad Ali. The guy who was told he had to go and fight in Vietnam and said no, stood up for what he believed in, and in the height of his career was put into jail through his, when he was heavyweight champion. And then he still fought through that, stood up for what he believed in, and was racially abused, and then came back and won the heavyweight championship of the world again. That self-belief, the fact that he was calling himself the greatest before anyone even knew who he was, that is why he is the greatest. Because the self-belief of that man, and this is the thing, everyone looks at him as a hero, but at the time, people call him a narcissist. And people confuse those things. And I've realized, Andrew, that most people don't want to win in life. Because when you put yourself out there, you're bold, you believe in yourself, what you do is you draw up deep insecurities in other people, because they will never take the risks that you are willing to take, even though deep down they know they want them. So to make themselves feel okay, because you are basically a mirror. You are the ugly mirror of truth that you're shining up to them. And every time that you push and you believe in yourself and you have conviction and you keep moving forward, you shine a light on them. And that is why you will get hate. But what I always say to people, Andrew, is I'd rather have haters than not stand up for what I believe in. Because every person throughout the history of time, whether it's business, politics, whatever it is, they all had haters, but they all stood up for something they fundamentally believed in. And that's what made them great. And Tell me someone who's an inspirational figure that didn't have haters. They all had them, yet all of the people, when you're on the come up, like, I mean, a lot of people will hate you, but all of the people they idolize, they all had haters. So it doesn't make sense. And this is what I've realized is most people don't want to win. I just want to find the people who do.
It's so important to tell the truth. And that was something I learned from Jordan Peterson. I believe it was 12 Rules for Life was the book. And if you can't have that conviction to tell the truth every single time, how could I know what you're saying to me is the truth? Like, so here's where I'm going with this in the agent, specifically for an agency. If you're claiming that you can make someone 10, 15 grand a month and you're charging $2,000 a month, right? You better be able to return on that or be able to prove that. So you need that conviction. And with the Churchill portion, he got the conviction by proving to himself that he could do it. And I can think of a ton of names that go over this. Hormozy is one that talks about this a lot, of being like, if I tell you no, I mean no. But if I tell you yes, I mean yes. Because you can count on my no because it hurts, it stings. And it would be easier to say yes. So you can count on it because it's genuinely coming from me.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest things that I feel like a people pleaser in me. I know, like, I want to say yes to go to things. I want to say yes to things.
Mm-hmm.
But deep down, I know I want to say no. And so when I say no, and I mean no, like I don't want to go, people respect that. And then when I say I want to go do something, they know I want to go do something because I'm not just trying to please them. And that's one of the biggest things in agencies in life. It's, if you say something, you need to mean it and you need to have the conviction behind it.
Yeah, and tying this back to agencies, two things. One thing is saying no to clients that you can work with and saying no to cash when you need it. Because when you, firstly, for your team members, they will appreciate you turning down. We all know this kind of deals that in your gut is telling you this will be a terrible client to work with, but they want to pay me money, but it's going to be horrendous. They're going to ask, so they're going to expect the world. I just know deep down that this ain't going to be a good idea, but I need the money right now, so I'm going to say yes. When you look back, those things and those clients are never ever worth it. And when you say no to those people, the people you say yes to, the conviction on those calls, it comes through. Like, conviction's the biggest thing in sales. It's not any of these tactics because it holds everything together. And then the other thing is with leadership, I've got this line, Andrew, which is sometimes you've got to be the bad guy today to be the good guy tomorrow. And that means that, let's say you need to let someone go. Let's say someone's done something really bad on a project. You need to have a go at them. You tell them why, of course. And at the time, a lot of people are emotional. And a lot of people aren't like this, so they're not used to it. You know, whether it's through their parenting or people they surround themselves with, most people are people pleasers. So when you give harsh criticism to someone and you tell them something you don't want to hear, you're going to be met usually with an emotional reaction. But, and here's the big but and why it's be the good guy tomorrow, in time, they will respect you because they will see that your decision was a long-term benefit to them. And that is where leaders, well, that's where, you know, people become leaders. And that's where the other people in the organization, they look up to that person to say, he or she, they can have the hard conversations. And this is a big problem for agency owners. Again, all the agents I've worked with, the ones that didn't do as well, they knew, and I told them, you've got this person in your team that you know isn't good enough. Why are you still working with them? And they would say things to me like, I'm just going to give them another chance. I'm pretty sure if we invest in this course, they can learn this skill and it can work out. And I said, no, that's not the real reason. The real reason is you made an emotional connection with this person and you don't want to let them down. But the thing is by lying to them, you're actually making your life, their life, and everyone else's life in the team a lot worse. So you need to be the bad guy today to be the good guy tomorrow. So do the thing. And what was interesting is when they did this, firstly, the conversation that they imagined in their mind was never as bad. Actually, the other people respected it. And most of the team members said, actually, I thought this was kind of coming. They were aware of it. And then the second thing is the relief and the freedom of anxiety these people got, that they could then use all of that extra energy into, their sales calls, night and day difference as a person. So if you want to free yourself from anxiety within your agency, whether it's team members that aren't good enough, whether it's clients you need to let go of, just do it, because I can assure you on the other side of that is massive growth, because you'll have more conviction and belief in yourself. Because if you can't you talked about honesty, but it all starts with yourself. If you can't hold the promises to yourself and be honest with yourself, there's no way in hell that you can be honest with other people. And people are smart. Biologically, they can sense that shit. So they can sense that you don't have conviction, you're a flaky person, you don't make decisions, you don't believe in what you say. And most of the time, and I know this because I've been through this process myself, Andrew, and I still struggle with it, it's those people aren't being honest with themselves, because that's where it all starts.
It's a very difficult thing to be honest with yourself, because a lot of the times, I think, at least I've seen this in myself a little bit, some of it's unconscious. Like, you don't even realize you're doing it until something hits you and you're like, oh. And like, okay, I want to circle back as well, because with like firing contractors and stuff, the other thing you have to be careful with on that is you have to let them know it's a problem first. So my short form editor, I know he's going to see this, I was talking to him and he's like, hey, everything has been really close on time. It's been like really hard. And he missed one. He missed one video. Right afterwards, I said to him, I'm like, listen, real talk, man. Like, I can't have this. You need to send things to me on time. And if you can't do this, I can't work with you. Like, period, end of story. If it's late again, I have to let you go. Like, there's no choice. And so framing it in that way as well has the conviction to say, hey, work on this so that I can continue to work with you. It also builds a team. You're being honest about it, and it doesn't come off as, like, you can still kind of come off as harsh in this, but it doesn't come off as like a dick move. Like, you feel like you genuinely have to do it. And that's so hard. I've had contractors before where I couldn't do it. And now that I've done it, it's like, that was hands down the best decision I've ever made in terms of working with people in the business.
Yeah, I agree, and I'll bolt something onto that, because this is something that took me way too long to learn, and it's great for agency owners. So you tell people the what in terms of, yeah, if you do this again, like, I've got to let you go. But, and this is where leadership comes in, you tell people the why. So let's say it's, with the video example. So the reason why I'm saying this is because if you don't give me the video on time, that means that I have to rush the process, and then we can't get the podcast out on time. And then the listeners will lose trust in our audience. The audience will lose trust in us, and then they won't spread the word, and then the podcast can't grow. And I want this podcast to grow, not just for me, but because I want to grow. I want this to be an opportunity for you. I want to grow and to get more listeners so we can do video editing with even bigger guests. And this can obviously massively give you an opportunity to improve your skill set. So now what have you done by doing this? You've transferred ownership to them. So now they understand why their I say little thing, but potentially big thing is impacting the whole. And if they do it right, they also understand the opportunity on the other side. And that's what great leadership is. It's about telling people the why. And so many people just don't do this. So many people just say, oh, there's the deadline, do it. And if you don't do it, then they have an angry conversation. But you'll be surprised, because when people feel like they're part of something and they feel like their thing that they're doing is massively contributing to the growth of this company, they take ownership internally. And that is where the biggest unlocks come from growth. The other thing that I'd say, especially what I've noticed of agency owners, is when you're hiring people, you're a bootstrap company. So you don't have to give people that long. Like rarely will there be a person who's terrible and then in a month's time, they're incredible. Like rarely will that ever happen. So how do you get around that? You do trial periods. So, you can do literally like a 2-week trial period or a month trial period, because most people, like I say, some people can blag an interview, but it's more about the character. Again, reliability, big character trait. Are they reliable? Are they organized? Are they proactive? Proactivity is the biggest thing to look out for in a growing agency. Are they giving you ideas of how to improve things? Are they taking ownership of things? You can figure this stuff out within 2 weeks to a month, like honestly. So most agencies, they come in and they kind of just let people work for 6 months. Like that's 6 months of growth that you're wasting. Whilst, some of the agencies I was working with, they're giving max 2-week, 1 month trials. And by the way, yeah, a lot of the time they have to let go of those people. And then they found someone else in month 2 that was amazing. And by the time month 6 rolled around, they were already 4x the size and revenue because they acted fast. So it's important to set the expectation from day one. These are the things that I need you to do. You've got a few weeks to prove that. If not, then we go our separate ways. If yes, let's come on this full time. And then the other thing is, when you obviously things go wrong, because they will still go wrong, really explaining the why to them behind the what, so you can transfer the ownership, and through that you will empower them to do so much more.
Are you familiar with the, I guess, concept servant leadership?
No.
So this is from, I'm a Boy Scout, or at least I came from Boy Scouts. And in Scouts, they have this idea, specifically National Youth Leadership Training. They have this idea called servant leadership. Mm-hmm. And servant leadership is this idea of, you're not the boss when you're the leader. You're the person who serves everyone.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest thing to comprehend and get through people, is like, when you're the boss, you're not actually the boss. Everyone else is your boss.
Yep.
And so empowering everyone else is how you, A, give people the power to do what they need to do best. 2, you can your job is to essentially set expectations around it. And 3, it almost takes the stress off of you as well, because you go, this isn't all on me. It's on me giving to them, if that makes sense. Like, that wasn't a great way to phrase it. Do you see what I'm saying?
100%. Actually, so if you like Hormozy, the book that he said took him from 8 to 9 figures was The Motive by Patrick Lencioni. Now, I've got my own theory on this, but I might be wrong, but I'm just kind of reading in between the lines. So what the book is it's a fable. It's a story of 2 leaders who think they're leaders and the motives behind why they're leaders. One guy, I'm not going to ruin the whole story. It's a pretty short read. It's fabulous. I'd really check it out. But one guy is doing it because he wants the ego boost. He wants the credit that comes from being the CEO. The other guy is literally doing what you said. He's a servant. He's a person who's willing to sacrifice most of the team. And it gets to a point where they kind of realize who the real leader is. And then the 2 companies try to merge. And then, again, I won't ruin the rest of the story. But what I think happened within that process, and the outside looking in, is I think that Alex and Layla were both trying to be the CEO of Gym Launch. And reading that book, Alex realized actually the person who serves the people is Layla. And then he focused more on the marketing and sales. And then he put Layla, the real CEO, in charge of the business. And that's what I think their big unlock was. So, it's quite interesting. But yeah, leadership is definition, in my opinion, at least, is a person who's willing to sacrifice most of their team. And if you're not good with people, and admit that, because not everyone is, you're not going to be able to do well in that role. So at the start of an agency, you might be able to obviously get through it, because obviously you can't hire like a great CEO. But when the time comes, when you're hitting, 25, 50K a month, if you're not good with people and you don't enjoy, understanding people, understanding their emotions and being there for them when they need you most, then hire someone else who is, because you need that to succeed. And the sooner you accept if you are that person, or you're not that person, you need to get someone else in, the sooner you will have a lot more success. And again, that book is called The Motive by Patrick Lencioni. It's a great read.
Summary of the podcast effectively: hire good people and be smart about who you hire.
Yeah. And then not just people for hiring, but also your network for partnerships. So one example I'll give is, I know this guy who essentially he was offered a CEO role at one of Amazon's biggest divisions, and they literally gave him a blank check. He was a very experienced business guy, and they wanted him so bad. They were like, write whatever money you want on this piece of paper. And he turned it down. And he went to a failing e-commerce brand, a men's tailored suit company in Canada. And over the course of them nearly being bankrupt, in 6 years, he turned them into a 250 million a year powerhouse, the second fastest growing company in all of Canada. And when I asked him, I was like, okay, so what's the most important thing like for your success here? And he said it's people, but not just the team, which is the most important thing, like we touched on, but also your partners. And he said, Nigel, I've cultivated relationships with people 10 years in advance that I needed anything from them. So when he joined that company, he made one phone call to a Chinese investor that gave him $60 million. He'd been building that relationship for 10 years, helping this guy out, asking for nothing in return. So tactically, what I say to people here is find the people that aren't successful yet, but they've got the right character traits that they're going to become killers. So maybe that's you, Andrew. Maybe someone should reach out to you and build a friendship with you. Or, like I talked about, these guys who run this agency who are 19, 21, those guys, if you connect with those people and you build relationships with them in advance, 10 years in time, like imagine the opportunities that come your way. Imagine if you were best friends with Elon Musk and you made friends with him at 18 years old. Everyone wants to be friends with Elon now, but there's only a few people who believed him at the start because they put the time in and they developed relationships with him. So now, anything they want, he would probably help them with, right? If he respected them. So my advice is look at the people who are on the come up and spend time helping them out, asking for nothing in return. And one day, 10 years in the future, they will open your world to opportunities that you could literally never, ever, ever imagine.
Yeah. That's what I'm hoping for. That's the goal.
Don't hope. Do it. You don't, it's not hope, man. It's strategically forging this into existence. Because if you hope, it won't happen. But if you build a plan and a strategy and you use this podcast potentially as the thing to find those people and then keep building relationships with them over the course of the next decade, you can strategically do that. And not everyone's going to make it. Like some people won't, but that's fine because the one or two people who do will be absolute superstars. And hopefully you'll be one of those people yourself, Andrew.
It's the 80-20 rule. You got to find the 20% that are doing the 80.
Yeah, but you've got to take self-responsibility to find those people and you be the one guy that just keeps offering value, asking for nothing in return, to the point where people think you're crazy. People think you're a freak, because no one else is going to do that. No one else has the balls to do that.
It's really hard to constantly give value as well. That's genuinely one of the hardest things that I find, because I'll run it. I'll do the same thing. And then, I'll say like, I'll get through everything that I remember now. And it's like, well, I have to repeat. And then you repeat it. And then you got to repeat again. But one thing that I want to point on this is I'm reading Cashvertising right now. And one of the things in there is repetition. So people probably won't see your ad 95% of the time. So by the time you're getting sick of the ad, triple that time on how long it's running.
Yep. Frequency, massive thing. It's again, it's to Robert Cialdini, it's the consistency bias. That's why the UK and the American population are all obese, because we're constantly fed advertising from fast food companies. That's why. Because what do we think of? We think of fast food because it's in our faces all the time. It's consistency bias. That's why big brands win. Yeah.
I'll tell you what, this is a good time. So where do you want to send people?
Well, at the time, I mean, obviously I've got the newsletter, davidtogolife.com. So, subscribe to that. We release 2 emails a week. And obviously LinkedIn, Nigel Thomas, check me out, connect with me, tell me your story, and build a relationship. At the time of recording, I am doing mentoring with 10 agency owners between that 5 and 25K a month mark, who are looking to work with a one-to-one with a 7-figure agency owner. If you're interested in that, ping me on LinkedIn. But apart from that, man, I'm just looking to connect with other people, and hopefully we got a few nuggets of wisdom out there for your audience today, Andrew.
For sure. And I'll link everything in the description as well. So if you're looking to check them out, check there.